Hey everyone, the Great Replacement, that initiative that the collectivists that do represent the establishment political parties, and not just Canada, but the US, the UK, and most Western developed nations. Yeah, that plan is in full effect, and we're seeing the results come to fruition as a consequence of this mass influx, this mass immigration movement, this mass displacement and replacement of domestic populations, where they're trying to paint over or mask some of the economic or social developments or policies in the past that have created a scenario now where you have to bring in multitudes of people from foreign countries to try to stave or backstop the great demographic divide. The baby boomers have become so accustomed to, well, especially the professionals, right? The baby boomers that rely on big government for their paycheck. Now they realize that, hey, we've enjoyed the fruits of all this cronyism, of all this fascism, of all this collectivism. But now that, there's our successive offsprings are turning away from this kind of shit, this kind of collectivism. Well, now we've got to bring in a whole new cohort of people from foreign countries that, unlike our children that are turning their backs on us because of the way we've treated them, or our grandchildren, but we need people that will now take care of us. We need strangers. We need people from foreign countries. We need people that are going to feel like they're obliged to support us economically and socially. That's what this whole Great Replacement shit is all about. They keep wanting to force the domestic population, those of us in Canada, to race down to that lowest common denominator. They want us to compete with these people that are coming from these foreign countries where their income was maybe 1/10, 1/100th of what we're used to, what we're accustomed to. They want us to race down for that as far as economics. And then, because they might very well be very good serfs and slaves to the ruling class, they want us to race down to compete with them in those social aspects as well. Well, you know what? Just tell them to fuck themselves. And you know what? If you want these people to take care of you, all right, well, that's the people that's going to take care of you. But you know what? Chances are they might not want to take care of you soon enough either. Because once they get to know who the fuck you people are all about and what you represent, they might very well do the exact same thing as what your successive offspring are saying. Is like, fuck you. And you fuckers enjoyed using politics, using big government to use your authoritarianism, to forcefully wealth and income redistribute your successive generation, to plunder them, to dictate and control every aspect and every area of their life, their social and economic lives. Well, you know what? Maybe these newcomers, maybe these immigrants, maybe these asylum seekers, maybe at some point in time they'll get to see your true colors too, and they too will join us in rejecting you fuckers and saying, you know what? No, you got to suffer for the consequences of all the bullshit, of all the bad deeds, of all the evil acts and all the fucking legislation and all the authoritarian methods and methodology used towards your successive offspring. Maybe they'll show solidarity with us, right? So that's why I don't throw immigrants on the bus. That's why I don't blame people that want to come to this country. That's why I blame the people in this country, the people, the central planners, the rulers, right? The supposed authorities in this country, or so-called experts. You fuckers are the ones that I hold responsible for all this shit. Not people because they want to take advantage of your willingness to forcefully redistribute incomes and wealth of the domestic population, or force the domestic population to come down and compete with these people. I don't blame them. Right? Like I say, in an actual genuine free market type of scenario, listen, it would be all about raising and elevating each other. Just because you fuckers chose to go the opposite approach and try to force us all to race down to a lowest common denominator and pit your own, like I say, pit your own children, your own grandchildren, your own peers, your own demographics, your own people, pit them against complete foreigners to compete with and divide for your attention or for your supposed wealth that you've taken and that you've plundered from your children or your grandchildren. I doubt they will continue to respect you when they truly get to know your true colors, your true stripes, and what you truly represent. Headline out of CBC News. The National today. Canada's population tops 37 million after record 2-year surge. Newsletter. A closer look at the day's most notable stories. Canada's population has topped 37 million, according to a new data released this morning by Statistics Canada, and is growing faster than it ever has before. It took just 2 years and 2 months to add 1 million people to the national population, which stood at 37,067,011 people as of April 1st. That's the shortest period on record for an increase of such magnitude. Like I say, the social contract, the Liberals and the Conservatives are completely in line. They'd be doing basically the same thing, except giving you a little bit different story, a little twist in the narrative, a little bit different. But trust me, your central planning hacks from both the left and the right side, supposed right side of the political spectrum, they'll all sell you up the river, folks. So don't think that there's anywhere you can run, well, except the Libertarian Party Canada. You can't trust those people, which I suggest you start doing. By comparison, it took 17 years from 1867 to 1884 for Canada to add its first post-Confederation million, growing from 3.46 million to 4.48 million. Then it took 20 more years to add the next million. Canada's population didn't hit double-digit millions until 1929. By the end of the Second World War in 1945, the country was home to just 12 million people. The centennial year, 1967, was when the population surpassed 20 million. In its first 50 years as an independent country, Canada added 4.6 million people, then 14 million more over the next half century, and now an additional 17 million people over the past 51 years. And then, as you can see, there's this annual estimates in Canadian population from July 1st, 1971 to July 1st, 2017. Canada's recent growth has everything to do with immigration. In the first quarter of this year alone, new migrants and non-permanent residents account for 85% of the population increase. 88,120 out of the 103,000 additions, which is all the more striking given that Canada logged 93,944 births and a record number of deaths, 78,907 in the first 3 months of 2018. So if there was almost 79,000 deaths, right, of, I guess what you call old stock Canadians, but the population increase from new immigrants and non-permanent residents were 88,000. So think about that, folks. Like I say, pure demographic shift, pure changing of what it even means to be Canadian. I think the Canadian people should really be more concerned and have a little bit more say in how that's happening and how that's unfolding and how that's playing out. Don't you think? And I'm not suggesting to be racist by any stretch of the imagination. Hey, I love people from all different backgrounds. Especially, I love diversity as far as skin color and all that. But we got to at least care about individual rights and freedoms, right? Just like if I adopted a children or something, I could bring in, or I could adopt one child or even multiple children. But the most important thing would be is like, yeah, you can't be evil. You can't try to unwind what I hold dear, the values, the morals, the principles that I espouse. If I'm going to bring you here and try to raise you and take care of you, and if I'm a principled person, well, I expect that you should at least be a principled person yourself. Stop trying to unwind or change the fact that, we care about individual rights and freedoms. That's the most important thing. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with their past religious experience or any of that shit. It's you have to uphold the values and the principles that are supposed to be a representation of Western values, right? Of what modern Western democracies are supposed to represent, even though we know that it's not really that way. That correlation no longer exists. But for those of us that care about it, we got to at least, push back so that we're at least headed back in that direction. But with this mass influx of migrants and asylum seekers and immigrants, you don't know what's going on in their mind. You don't know, maybe like what we're seeing, like a stifling of freedom of speech, religious suppression for Christians. I mean, you're seeing how there's a whole lot of shifting going on as far as not just demographics, but social and economic values and principles that are held by the majority or the bulk of the population in this country. You can't change things that much and in that short of a time frame and not expect or at least experience some very harsh and negative consequences as a result of doing so. The onus is on us, folks. We got to be reasonable. There's got to be some common sense. There's got to be some good judgment, but it's not happening from any of those in the establishment media. None of the leaders in the establishment political parties. It's not happening in academia for the most part. I mean, some areas maybe, but the dominant voices, the dominant areas that's got the The pretense of authority are those that are using collectivism, forced subjugation, forced wealth and income redistribution, demographic shifts and changes, indentured servitude, slavery, forcing the unborn, the successive generations. Look at what they're doing. I mean, there's just too much shit that's happening all at once. And like I say, this is the kind of shit, this is where civil wars, civil conflicts, and family values break down to the point where you don't know what the potential outcome is going to be at some point in time in the future. It could be as short term as, 6 months from now. It could be, you don't know when it's going to happen, folks, but when the time does come where this shit does happen, where all this plays out, where the recognition of all this destruction of, like I say, societal or social constructs or values or the principles contained within any kind of setting where you say, hey, we're all one big happy family. Once you start breaking down that family in such a manner, in such a way, the potential outcome can be quite devastating and quite harsh and quite violent even at times. So we really got to start standing up and speaking out against this stuff. Adding 1 million people in like basically 2 years in a population that only has 36 million. Yeah, that's a massive and detrimental change in not just politics, but the culture of the country, especially in these big urban centers. And that's not even taking into account what it's going to have an effect on the housing market, the job market. There's so many different spin-off areas, socially and economically, that this can also be a negative revelation or experience for so many. But once again, I'm just here. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just trying to help educate and inform and maybe enlighten some people, and hopefully that we can use some common sense, some good judgment, some reason, some logic. Be moral, be compassionate. I care about people that come from some of these foreign countries too, and I'm not against migration or immigration in this country. My God, I'm very thankful for the fact that I don't have to just eat fish and chips, right? I'm glad. That's just kind of a joke, folks, just a joke. But I'm glad that we have many different people from many different geographical areas, many different backgrounds. I love it. I love genuine diversity. Not just diversity of skin color, but diversity of thought, diversity. I'm all for that. As long as we just stick to the genuine basic rules of what libertarianism, what being a responsible, moral human being is all about, is live and let live, non-aggression principle. Don't use violence, force, coercion, or theft against your fellow man, woman, or child. Right? Don't try to impose your ideas on others. Have that live, let live mentality. We can all get along, and we'll be just fine. And not just socially, but economically, we'll prosper in many areas, in many regards, and it'll be a benefit for us all. I know that, but we got to do it the right way, folks. You got to do it the right way. The way they're doing it now, the way the liberals are doing, trying to use this Band-Aid approach to paint over and mask over all the bad decisions and political positioning and rhetoric from the past. It's not the way to do it. But once again, they're all about quick fixes. Not doing the right thing for the long term. They're all about the quick fix because that's what party politics is all about, because they're only in power for so long. So they just want to do what's in their best interest, what's in the interest of them for the short term, which always ends up being a net negative for the rest of us, for not just the short term, but the medium and long term as well. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.